Shalom, everybody. This is, I don't know if I'm going to make this part one, part two, part three of the healthcare system. I really don't know how I'm going to do it. But know that there are three parts. And this is going to be the last part of the beginning of the healthcare system, how it is actually established. In my other videos, I talked about, in the video that I made about the husband being the priest of the household, I talked about the infections that are dealt with, that the priests deal with. In another video, I talked about how the priests get paid through the tithes, offerings, and sacrifices. And then another video, I talked about how the priesthood was actually, and how the priesthood was established, and how the house of Levi was put together to be the administrators of that healthcare system by giving cities throughout other Israelites' land, and how they were just appointed to deal with the tabernacle of testimony, which later became the temple, as we all know, and which is what the priests deal with. This video, I'm going to start with something that a lot of people miss out on, and they don't look at it as part of their health, but it is, and it's our days of rest, which we have. Most people call them the Sabbath day, and now we use that time to come together as whether you have a camp, a temple, cultural center, school, whatever you might have. People use that time to come together and to talk about and to learn about Yah. Let's read what the scripture says about the days of rest, which is also a part of our healthcare system. By the way, this is Yahuda ben Israel, if I didn't say that already. So people know me as, and I love the law, statutes, commandments, and judgments because they make real good sense to me. Now, Exodus 23, verse 12. 6 days thou shalt do thy work, and on the seventh day thou shalt rest, that thine ox and thine ass may rest, and the son of thine handmaid and the stranger may be refreshed. May be refreshed. Now, those of you who have really just done nothing on the Sabbath day, you may have realized that by the time, if you worked on the Sabbath day, because some people do it, or you work 5, 6 days or 6, 7 days a week, you'll notice that by the time the fourth day rolls around, what we call Wednesday, that you're tired, you're worn out, you're snapping at people, you're mentally tired. Well, that's why it says here, so that you may be refreshed, so that you rest on that Sabbath day, so that you can be refreshed, which is the seventh day of the week. Exodus 31 and verse 12. And the Adonai spake unto Moses, saying, Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you. Now that is the main reason most brothers and sisters keep the Sabbath day, because they want to have that as a sign, like it says, between me and you throughout your generations. Not realizing that it is also part of our healthcare system. It's a day for us to rest so that we can be refreshed. And I mean, just imagine that. What other nation on earth has a mandatory day of rest? None that I know of. And that's another thing about this healthcare system that I like so much, because it really does look out for the health and well-being of the people, whether it's through the priests and the Levites getting a portion of the food supply, whether it's the men being the priest of the household, looking out for the infection of that household, or infections, or bacteria, making sure bacteria is not spreading in their household. And also here we have a mandatory day of rest, so that we can be refreshed. But verse 14, Exodus 31 verse 14 says, You shall keep the Sabbath therefore, for it is holy unto you. Everyone that defileth it shall surely be put to death, for whosoever doth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. Verse 15, 6 days may work be done, but in the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whosoever doeth any work on the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Verse 16, Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Adonai had made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. Exodus 34:21, 6 days thou shalt work, but on the seventh day thou shalt rest. In earing time and in harvest thou shalt rest. Exodus 35 verse 1 through 3 is also talks about the Sabbath day. And Deuteronomy 5 verse 12 through 15 also talks about the Sabbath day as well, and keeping the Sabbath. So that's also an important part of our healthcare system, that we have a mandatory seventh day, a mandatory day of rest, so that we can be refreshed. Which is also interesting, because it said even y'all needed to be refreshed. That's what he did on that day. He was refreshed. But I'll let everybody else meditate on that one. Also, what I'm going to talk about now, because this segues or goes into the sacrifices that are made, and the reason for the sacrifices given to the priests, and their job as priests are as heads of the healthcare system. And this is Numbers chapter 5, verse 5 through 10. And the Adonai spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, when a man or woman shall commit any sin that may commit to do a trespass against the Adonai, and that person be guilty, then they shall confess their sin which they have done. So you have to first confess your sin. And he shall recompense his trespass with the principal thereof, and add unto it the fifth part thereof, and give it unto him against whom he has trespassed. Now, when I talk about this, again, this is what I call the spiritual part of, we call it spiritual, but it's the emotional part of our healthcare system. So we're dealing with different types of emotions. And for those of you who deal with the New Testament, now you know why Christ, he was born king, he was also born high priest, and why he went around pulling spirits out of people. He was just representing his power, or his job as priest. I'm going to read verse 7 again, because I think a lot of people miss this. Then they shall confess their sin which they have done, and he shall recompense his trespass with the principal thereof, and add unto it the fifth part thereof, and give it unto him against whom he hath trespassed. But if the man hath no kinsman to recompense the trespass unto, let the trespass be recompensed unto the Lord, even to the priest who gets it, beside the ram of the atonement, whereby an atonement shall be made for him. And every offering of all the holy things of the children of Israel, which they bring unto the priest, shall be his. And every man's hollow thing shall be his. Whatsoever any man giveth the priest, it shall be his. So again, this is where the priests come in and dealing with sin. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about what those sacrifices actually are, so people get a better idea of how they work. Now, I'm not going to read everything that happens in these sacrifices, are these offerings, but I am going to read what they are in the scripture that they come out of. First, I'm going to talk about the burnt offering. It's Leviticus 6. It says, and the Adonai spake unto Moses, saying, at verse 8, Leviticus 6, verse 8, Command Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the law of the burnt offering. It is the burnt offering, because of the burning upon the altar all night until the morning, and the fire of the altar shall be burning in it. And I guess I will read the whole thing. And the priest shall put on his linen garment, and his linen breeches shall he put upon his flesh, and take up the ashes which the fire hath consumed, with the burnt offering on the altar, and he shall put them beside the altar. Verse 11, and he shall put off his garments, and put on other garments, and carry forth the ashes without the camp unto a clean place. Verse 12, and the fire upon the altar shall be burning in it, it shall not be put out. And the priest shall burn wood on it every morning, and lay the burnt offering in order upon it, and he shall burn thereon the fat of the peace offerings. The fire shall ever be burning upon the altar, it shall never go out. And I guess it's good that I read that one, because almost all of our offerings are burnt offerings like that, other than the ones that are boiled. So that kind of covers all the other offerings that I'm going to talk about. And one of those, of course, is the meat offering. And that's Leviticus 6, verse 14. And this is the law of the meat offering. The sons of Aaron shall offer it before the Lord, before the altar. He shall take of it his handful of the flour of the meat offering, and of the oil thereof, and all the frankincense which is upon the meat offering, and shall burn it upon the altar for a sweet savor, even the memorial of it unto the Adonai. And the remainder thereof shall Aaron and his sons eat. With unleavened bread shall it be eaten in the holy place, in the court of the tabernacle of the congregation they shall eat it. It shall not be baked with leaven. I have given it unto them for their portion of my offerings made by fire. It is most holy, as is the sin offering and as the trespass offering. All the males among the children of Aaron shall eat of it. It shall be a statute forever in your generations concerning the offerings of the Adonai made by fire. Everyone that touches them shall be holy. Now we have sin offering, which is Leviticus 6, verse 24 through 30. We have a trespass offering, which is kind of like the sin offering, not exactly the same, and that's the trespass offering is Leviticus 7, verse 1 through 10. And listen to what's going on here. We have a sin offering. We have a trespass offering. We have a peace offering, which is Leviticus 7, verse 11 through 21 and 28 through 38. We have a jealousy offering. So we're starting to deal with spiritual things here. We have a jealousy offering, which is 11 through 31. And we have an offering that's made if a person sins through ignorance, which is Numbers 15, verse 22 through 31. And Leviticus 4, verse 1 through 12. And 13 through 35, which is different like that because when a person sins through ignorance, there are different sacrifices for it. If a king does it, if a common man does it, if the whole house of Israel does it, if a man does it, or a stranger does it, there are different ones that happen. There are different types of sacrifices if somebody sins through ignorance. That's also Leviticus 5, verse 14 through 16. We also have a sacrifice, and keep in mind, again, we're dealing with spiritual issues here at this point, or emotional issues. We also have a sacrifice for offering for if a person swears or if they touch an unclean thing, and that's Leviticus 5, verse 1 through 13. And we also have them for if somebody takes something away from somebody else violently, somebody gets something deceitfully, if something delivers something to a person to keep and they keep it but they shouldn't, and a lost thing that a person finds. And so we have offerings that deal with all those things, like what we're talking about there is theft, basically. But to keep in mind, what we're talking about here are spiritual things at this point when we start talking about those last offerings that I read. Now, what's important about that is that the priests, when they bring these offerings to the priest, and the priest can look and tell when it's a particular type of offering because of how it's offered, the priests know exactly what's going on because the sins are also confessed to them. Now, this does not mean that the police show up and they immediately arrest that person, because once they offer up that sacrifice, their sins are forgiven. So if a person is found guilty, of a crime, because two witnesses testified against them, then of course offering up one of these, giving one of these offerings would be mandatory. They would have to do it. But even if they aren't found guilty of a crime, and let me make something clear. Just because somebody did something wrong, they shouldn't just take this sacrifice, take these offerings up here to be sacrificed. You only do that if you are truly sorry for what you have done. Okay, you only do it if you are truly ashamed of what you have done. Okay, a person does not take these up there just because they did something wrong and they think once they give it to the priest, that offering to the priest or to be sacrificed, all of a sudden their sins are just forgiven and everything is over with. If it's not in your heart to if you're not sorry within your heart for what you have done, then the Holy Father will know about it, and that's what matters. Now, there are scriptures to back that up, most of them in the New Testament, but I'm not going to go there because I'm talking about the healthcare system here, and I want to stay focused on the spiritual part of our healthcare system. So the priests are getting these sacrifices, and they're writing down what's going on. They don't have to write down who bought it, but they can write down what this person said they did. Now imagine in certain districts, that the priests are in. They're getting not a lot of sacrifices because a lot of people are touching unclean things. You know, a certain percentage of people are touching unclean things. A certain percentage of people are ignorant of the law. A certain percentage of people are doing this. A certain percentage of people are doing that. They are keeping track of this. They know what's going on. So because they are the priests, are judges, they can move resources through the Levites to deal with those spiritual things. They can put more resources into getting people counseling, which is also a part of what the Levites do, which is now you know why Christ was called what he was called. Being high priest, being head of that healthcare system. So they can move resources where they need to go to deal with the sin that is going on within that area that they work in, or that they are over. They could come together and say, okay, we're having a huge problem everywhere with this particular sin. So we need to move resources into dealing with this particular sin. Because again, and I have to remind people again, because it's very hard sometimes for brothers and sisters, including most people, but it's including Hebrew Israelites, to wrap around their head that we have an actual healthcare system. We have a legal system that includes a healthcare system. We have a justice system. We have an educational system. And we have an economic system. And it actually works. And it's set up to work. So this is how the spiritual part of it works in a small little nutshell. I didn't get deep into it because this is Nation Building 101. But this is how the Levites learn what spiritual issues are going on in the land because of the sacrifices that they get, and because, like the law said, you have to confess that sin. This gives brothers and sisters an opportunity to deal with what they need to deal with by getting the counseling that they need. This gives the priest the opportunity to move resources in certain areas. And to tell you how deep it goes, let's say that people are sinning because they're turning their, let's say they may be somewhat turning their backs on Yah, and they confess that. The priest say, okay, we're glad you confess it, give them the counseling that they need, but they notice this is going on in one particular area of the land, of whoever's land, whatever tribe's land. Well, now they can look at it and say, okay, we might have some type of treason going on. And yes, we have treason and sedition within our law. This is also a part of our law, treason and sedition. So the priests keeping track of these things, they can touch on other aspects of the law. You have a lot of out of wedlock births going on. The priest can move resources into dealing with that. You know, and I already put up a video about that, about what happens when a woman gets judged for having sex outside of marriage and doesn't get caught, and she's ready to get married. You know, because she has actually broken the law, she has to confess to her father, who has to, because she's broken the law, she has to go before the priests and the judges so she can be judged. And that's why I said in that particular video, which was making a woman be responsible for her, I think it was sexual behavior and health, she doesn't have to be stoned to death, because there's nothing in the law it's a set punishment for a situation like that. She can get counseling. She needs to get tested for any type of sexually transmitted diseases, and there probably needs to be a hold on when she can get married. And it's this part of the law that allows for something like that to take place, because her sin she has confessed her sin. She had to, because of the way his law is set up. But like I said, you need to go watch that video. It was part 2 of how to make a woman responsible for her sexual behavior and health. I think that was the name of it. But because she's confessed her sin, there she goes. She's putting it to the system, and she gets the counseling and the help that she needs. But you know, like I said before, we do have a healthcare system. We need to recognize it. We need to remember that what I'm talking about now can be done today, because we're already doing it. There are Hebrew Israelites out there that are healthcare professionals, who are administrators, who understand exactly what I'm saying, who understand that doing something like this is not that difficult, because today we actually just call it psychology, most of it. But so to remember that this is not that hard to do this today. Actually, it's already being done, but the way it's being done now is being done with a different set of priorities, and it's not as efficient, and there's not as much of a focus on getting people the spiritual help that they need and the emotional help that they need. Heck, we have a mandatory day arrest thousands of years ago. But they're just getting around to learning now how rest is important for a person's mental and physical health. And it's thousands of years later, you know. So like I always say, I hope you all got something out of this video. There's a comment section below, or you can email me if you want to talk about it some more. I love talking about the law, statutes, commandments, and judgments. And shalom.